Good, go for it. Thank you. Morning, everybody. So it's our extraordinary meeting of the CCG board this morning, which we have on an annual basis. So our job today is to receive the annual report of the CCG and the annual accounts, and to make sure they represent the work we've done in 15-16. And then in addition, we'll be reviewing and agreeing the budgets for 16-17. So, have we got apologies from Mike Lane?
Dawn, Anthony, Mike Lane, Seth Frank.
Thank you, okay. And any declarations of interest? Thank you. And we call it. Good, okay. So, shall we get straight in then? So, Neil, we're going to do the annual accounts and there's additional documentation as well. Kick off, thank you.
Okay, so hopefully you received a set of accounts that you've had a chance to go through. So what I just plan to do is to really just to talk you through what the main differences were between 14-15 and 15-16. That was presented to the audit committee back in April. So I'll just go through and highlight the main changes there. I'll then just highlight some of the differences between the version that you received electronically on Friday and the version that is the latest version we've got in place at the moment. And then really just to flag some of the changes that we had from the draft accounts to the final accounts now. So really just to mention that we've actually achieved our target of the 4.2 million, so what we reported at the draft account stage has materialised now and what the auditors have signed off at. That has meant we've hit our quick targets and management costs as well. Some of the main changes to the accounts from last year that we presented to the audit committee, so this related to some employee costs. So that was in the region of £2 million, mainly related to the fact that we had a recruitment drive both within the CCG and the collaborative, so to note that we do report all the collaborative costs in here. We also had additional staff that was delivering some of the QUIC programme. We had a significant drawdown in 15-16, so that also would contribute towards that. And in addition, around operating expenses, the main differences there were around categorisation, so this was just where it had moved from a healthcare trust to a foundation trust, so there's a straight swap between those two lines. There are some establishment costs which was linked to the Better Care Fund, so this year we had a £20 million Better Care Fund that we're reporting on. There was also an increase around voids. So this is the cost of space that is unoccupied that NHS Property Services would charge to us. So there was an increase of around about 200,000 to 300,000 on that. There was also some consultancy costs increases, predominantly driven by over £1 million of a report from McKinsey's into the one version of the truth. So we're showing the gross cost to that within our books, but there have been contributions to that from other CCGs, which is actually reported through the contract. But that's what driving the consultancy spend there. So then, just in terms of some of the changes that I've made to the version that you will have seen on Friday, I've now included page numbers, so there is an hour contents, which actually then takes you through, and page numbers will make some sense, and you can navigate your way around a lot easier. There were some minor rounding differences that we had to put within the template, so this is just differences usually between 14-15 and 15-16, just to get the two versions all lined up. Presentational differences, things like dashes instead of zeros in the accounts, and that sort of thing. We've also added an additional note into note 7, which is around future minimum lease payments, and this is again linked to the void costs. So what the auditors wanted to was to say was that what was our future liability for those void costs, and because we can't say with any certainty year on year, because we're obviously looking to fill those void costs, we weren't able to put a real value on it, and that we would assess that and look at that each year. So that's what the note in effect does say. So I think the just 3 points that I wanted to just pick up, which was the changes from the draft. So I'm aware that the board hasn't seen the original draft, but probably just to give an indication of what the auditors were actually focused on. So note 16 around the pool budgets, which was around the BCF, they were keen for a table to be inserted which puts a bit more detail behind what the actual income and expenditure around that was. So that's why there is now a table in there and is a bit more detailed than we've had from the previous year. Under note 17, related party transactions, they wanted us to increase the de minimis limit for NHS providers in there from the 1 million that we reported, not only in the draft accounts, but what we reported in 14-15, up to £5 million. That figure was in line with the value that we have to report contracts by NHS provider at, so that's why that 5 million limit was set for that. And also under note 18 we needed to make reference to the delegated commissioner around primary care that will be coming up in 16-17 as a post-balance sheet event. So that's all I plan to do in terms of my high-level presentation to you. I don't know whether you've got any questions that you might want to raise from the accounts that you saw on Friday.
No. Thank you, Neil. Stephen, would you like to comment in your role as in the audit
Okay,
committee?
well, just the audit committee met earlier this morning and has been over both the accounts and the annual report. We were very pleased with the accounts and agreed we could recommend them to the board. Perhaps the point I would highlight is that the external auditors, KPMG, gave a very positive external audit of them. I mean, it really was very clean, as clean as you're going to get, frankly. There were 2 points perhaps worth mentioning. They only actually raised one particular issue, which is a fairly technical issue about the journals and the inability of the system to enable automatic numbering. And we agreed that that's a system design issue. It's back to our old friend ISFE, which NHS England requires us to use, and we did agree that we should raise this again with NHS England because it's an irritant. The grand scheme of things, it's a minor irritant. It's not significant to the accounts. We also they do include in their report a section on value for money, which we found quite reassuring. They looked in particular at 3 areas which the board is conscious of. One is about the risks around St George's own finances and how we are managing that, the Better Care Fund and primary care co-commissioning. So they actually look specifically at those 3 areas as risk areas for us. And in each case, having reviewed what we've been doing in the minutes and all those sorts of things, again gave very positive reassurance that the CCG is, in their view, doing what we should be doing, which we found comforting. And we may want to keep that for the record. So basically, actually, it was a very clean audit, and the audit committee, we had 1 or 2 queries and some things we think we could be clear in presentational terms potentially in the future, although not probably in the accounts themselves because they are fairly constrained in what you can include. But basically it was very positive, and we agreed we could recommend them to the board.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions or comments on those? No? Okay, thank you very much. So the board notes the audit opinion, and we're happy to approve the accounts. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
So, shall we go on to the annual report? Sean, are you going to just lead us
Yeah.
into this. Thank
I'll
you.
give a few words of introduction. Yeah. So, in the annual report, as you said in your introduction, Nick obviously summarises the work of the CCG in the year just gone, 2015-16. We've been required to follow not a detailed design template, but an outline structure in the national guidance. So, the annual report's in 3 sections. The first section is called performance reports, but it doesn't mean performance in a sort of narrow performance management sense. It effectively means everything that's not finance and governance in a way. So it's all of the work of the CCG, including around all commissioning of services that we've undertaken, redesign of services, work on strategic planning, and so on. So that's all wrapped up in the performance section, including work on improving quality of services. And then there's a governance section, which sets out the governance of the CCG and how we manage our business, the work of membership of the committees, how we identify and manage risks, etc. And then there's the finance section, which deals with all the things we need to put in there, which links up with the accounts that we've just approved. So we've had a few goes at this and taken on account of feedback that the lay members in particular have kindly given us. I think we still can do a bit better with future annual reports, and what we've tried to make sure that this was as focused on outcomes as possible and not just about process and things that we've done in terms of, you know, we've implemented this specification or we've got this particular scheme in place, but actually what's the outcome for patients, and sometimes I think we've managed to do that reasonably successfully, and sometimes perhaps we haven't done it as quite as well as we might have done. So I think there's still some work to do to improve it going forward, to actually make sure it is as completely outcomes focused as could be. Having said that, there will be a more public facing version that is much shorter than this, which as we've done in previous years, which hopefully will be the sort of thing where we can pick up some of those outcomes, and it will be the sort of document that hopefully the public and others would be interested in reading, because I think most people won't want to wade through a document that's 70 pages long. And some of it does follow the national requirements in terms of how you have to present some of the information and even some of the language that you have to use, which is not particularly friendly in terms of the public. There are 1 or 2 amendments that we've made since this document went out to the governing body. Not major factual changes, but there's some presentational things. So we've actually amended your forward, Nicola, and there've been a few other issues around sort of presentation and a few typos that we've corrected. So just to make sure that the board are aware of that as well. The final deadline for sort of signing it off and submitting it is noon on Friday. So we've still got the opportunity to make 1 or 2 presentational changes if we want to. But I think the facts are as they are set out, really. Certainly in terms of the audit committee, this morning the audit committee asked for a few more explanations to be put into the finance section around particularly the tables that summarise the expenditure, for example on remuneration, consultancy spend, off payroll and so on. The facts are in there and they're all correct. They don't need to be changed, but we could do with putting in some additional explanation, particularly thinking about members of the public or any other interested people reading it, just to describe what's behind some of the numbers in a bit more and bring that to life for people, because we've tried to add a few footnotes, but I think we can do a bit more, so we will do that before noon on Friday. That was all I was going to say in terms of introduction.
Okay.
I'm obviously happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Any comments, questions? Stephen?
Well, as Sean said, we discussed this again this morning, and I think I'd just report 3 things really, consistent with what Sean said. Firstly, I think it's quite important to recall we do think this is a big improvement on previous years. I mean, we've struggled over the last 3 years with these annual reports for all sorts of reasons. This one we think is, it's just tighter, better written, shorter, I think. So quite a big tick for improvement. Secondly, as Sean says, we did raise 1 or 2 further specific points where, we think a bit more explanation is helpful. We're trying to always read this through the most hostile critic's eyes, which is, I think, the only people who are going to read this really are the hostile critics. So sorry, civil service training here. The point of most significance, not for we don't think that's all we want to make changes in terms of this. So we can recommend this report as it stands, subject to the sort of further, typically clarity points. We did think that, and picking up Sean's point, there is still an issue which we don't think is just a drafting point. I mean, there is at a drafting level, when we play games, about activity versus outcome. My sense, this is it's a generalised statement, so it's not it's not universally true, but there is a sense when you read it of you get the thing. The CCG did this, that, and the other. And it's all correct. We did a whole pile of activity. People work very hard, What is often not said is what bloody difference did all that make? Or even what difference would it make in 2 years' time, assuming there's a time lag. And therefore, even in structural terms, I think something which said, we did this last year, which is important to capture in some sort of sense, but then what is the difference we have made or will make in terms of what real people in the real world, patients and the community, would see as a result of all this activity. And I still think that bringing that out more explicitly is where this report doesn't quite go as far as it might. And the importance of that, at one level, and I know Graham and colleagues are a bit irritated at one level by the work we put into a document that in some ways nobody's going to read, versus the short version which we produced for the annual meeting in September. But I think my view, and I think our view, was that it's important not just as a document, but in terms of our own mindset. And I would extend, therefore, as a general reflection on some of the work we have here, that we have a lot of activity reported. People have done, and it's all good stuff. You can't dissent from it. But do we always rigorously ask ourselves, we do all this stuff, but so bloody what? And I think actually forcing ourselves to address that explicitly, and accept perhaps that a lot of this activity, it doesn't make any real difference, or it's a difference that you may see in some future day, but being conscious of that is quite important. So anyway, that was a sort of general reflection on this report, which is not the same as change the report itself. So we thought it was a big improvement, and subject to those sort of fairly detailed points, we agreed we could recommend it warmly to the board.
Okay. Great, thank you. So, and just to think about what that might mean then in future years. So, presuming the template will be tweaked but not changed that much in future years, I anticipate. Will we be able to fit that kind of approach into this report, or are we actually talking about maybe we should just we probably have to do this, but do something else as well, which is more meaningful for us that we can actually really judge ourselves against? But the template would accommodate
absolutely,
it.
Yes. I mean, it's not that restrictive.
Okay.
So absolutely, we can. And I think we should. I think Stephen's right.
Yeah.
We should.
And we do have a section, and it's structured through it, which says something. I don't know what the heading is, but it does say what and often it does have both of those in it. We did some things. We set up a group that did this, or we commissioned. And sometimes it does go on to say the end effect was patients saw people sooner or something.
Exactly,
Sometimes it's there, but it'd be quite good to almost force it to be there, because sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. So we put our own template within that template of
Yes,
this is what we did and this is the impact it had.
Yes, and it's the impact that I think is, as Stephen's saying, it's not consistently there in every single area.
Great.
But just building on Stephen's comment, I think that's absolutely right, and actually there's something about it. It's business as usual, so it is about challenging ourselves and how we present and discuss and consider all of the work streams and programmes through the year. Therefore, the annual report almost writes itself, because we would have all of that wealth of material that's come to governing body or committees or whatever described in that way, and then you just lift it into an annual document. So it's part of changing how we operate all the time, not just in the preparation of an annual report. And we can make progress.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for that reflection. That's really helpful. Anything else anyone would like to add? Okay, so we're happy to approve this as our 15-16 annual report then?
Sorry, just before we go, so I think this is an appropriate moment just to express appreciation, thanks actually to the board, the members and the entire staff for all of the work that is reflected in the annual report,
and the accounts.
Yes, indeed, all of our partner organisations. For the work that's expressed here, it is impressive actually for the the volume, quantity and the quality of the work that has been undertaken across the CCG with partners this year, and specifically on the annual accounts to thank obviously budget holders for keeping the position under control, but most specifically the finance team. In his absence, Hardev, for 10 months of the year of leadership of a financial programme, but since then obviously for Neil, I think it's quite a hard ask to come in and take a leadership role in this at the very end of the year in which you're then producing a report. So special thank you to Neil for steering through the latter stages of that.
So I'd just like to say you just completely thieved my closing.
Sorry. We rehearsed it, obviously.
I'm going to say them again later anyway.
Oops.
Right, thank you. Okay, so shall we do budget setting now? Neil?
Yeah, so it's going to be a bit of a poor relation in relation to the annual accounts process. So this, apologies, this probably should have been at the April board anyway, but because we had to have, we went through Finance Committee, and they weren't satisfied around the level of unidentified quip that we had in at that particular time. So what we had is one further round of working with budget holders to try to address that gap. And I'm pleased to say we have actually managed to address the gap down to around about a £200,000 unidentified amount. So against a £12.7 million quip, it's a fairly immaterial amount anyway, and noting the risk even within the 12.7 million. So just as a headline value, we are going to deliver a 0.5% surplus, which is obviously not the 1% that we are required to do from business rules. At this stage, to note that it hasn't been formally signed off that by NHS England at the moment, because they're obviously trying to get all their budgets balanced, but at this point in time that's agreed with NHS England, that 0.5% surplus. And that also includes the 1% non-recurrent reserve, which we have to leave uncommitted. So just moving swiftly through the pack that you've got, because a number of the slides just relate to the planning slides that have been to boards previously, so I'm not planning to go through all the assumptions, but I'm happy to pick up questions around that at the end if we want to. But it's really just to pick up the main areas that we've been focusing on and where we've had some of the issues in terms of getting agreed budgets. So acute contracts, so given us these extra few weeks has meant that we've been able to reflect the latest position, and contracts now are, there's a large, certainly by value, we have probably around about 80% agreed. The largest contract still remaining unsigned and unagreed is Chelsea and Westminster, and that is probably a gap in the order of £500,000 against the cash envelope, so it's not an insignificant gap that we've got at the moment. However, that has been a late agreement with their host, and obviously we're now, and we are a major associate in that agreement, so nothing can proceed on that contract without our sign-off. But I think what we want to do is to understand fully what some of those issues are, and I'm not satisfied at the moment that all the answers to the questions we've raised have been answered. But in terms of all the other contracts that remain unagreed, they're largely small value contracts, so are not likely to cause us any issues around the values that we've estimated those to be. Mental health, we've now reached agreement with our South West St George's, which was the biggest outstanding area. Though the value is now reflected within the position that we've got in here. In addition, we've had to put money into parity of esteem, and we are now achieving that parity of esteem in line with what we were requested to do with NHS England. There was various iterations that we had to go through, so I think at the time when I presented the planning numbers at the last board, it has moved again, and there's a little bit more money that's had to find its way into it. But the important point to note is that mental health parity of esteem is being met in line with what our NHS have asked us to do. Primary care budgets now includes the delegated commission budgets. Obviously there is a level of risk around this, that we had the due diligence that we went through earlier this year. We still need to do more detail around looking at those budgets, but at the moment we are assuming that the level of primary care or the costs of primary care will be equal to the allocation that we've received. But to note that there is a level of risk around that assumption. And final, just around the QIP, just to reiterate again, a £12.7 million QIP programme, higher than we've ever had before. It's around about 2.7% of our resource limit when you include primary care in there. We've got some of the unidentified, how we've covered the gap around unidentified was really about, we ended up finding around about 1.1 million from just reviewing our budgets and just saying, so actually do we need that, or can we actually slip some of those budgets? So some of that, around about 200,000 to 300,000 of that find is only non-recurrent. So again, it's almost with a view to looking at 17, 18, the QIP planning is starting now with that, and also we need to be clear that we have to achieve this QIP programme this year, because if we don't, it's then an increased ask in future years, and that's a position we really don't want to be in. So we're all entirely focused on that, and we will be robustly monitoring all the budgets, ensuring that they are working to plan, and where they're not, we've got an action plan in place to address that. So I think all I would highlight the board to look at is the risks that we've got on page 139 of the pack, or page 22 if you're looking at the slides. So QIP I've already mentioned. I think contracts, I would be saying that we've put enough activity into the contracts, and certainly in line with what NHS England asked us to do. This was one of the issues that we had, and one of the reasons why we're saying we can only achieve a 0.5% surplus. So there is a risk around things like RTT that comes in year that is higher than what we're expecting, because it is an estimation at this stage. So that's obviously one of the areas where potentially we may come under pressure. Specialised commissioning transfers, so we've seen the first lot of activity around morbid obesity that's coming our way. There are a number of questions around things like waiting, being funded for achievement of waiting times around morbid obesity. If we don't receive that and we get that budget in year, that's another risk that we are ended up having to carry. And obviously primary care delegated commissioning is another area that I've already mentioned. So that's all I planned to say. I'm happy to pick up any questions, but I would hope that the board is able to approve the budgets. And just to say that it has been through FRC twice, and the final time, and I think Stephen could probably add more to this, but was satisfied with the work that we'd done between the first time we took it and the second time.
So, yeah, anything to say, Stephen?
No, I mean, the reason we were not happy the first time was there was a serious shortfall in terms of, I mean, unidentified savings that we felt just very uncomfortable, so we asked for more work. That work seems to have been done. I think our view is it is still, it is obviously extremely tight. We haven't got the sort of reserves that we've normally had in the past years. The QIP demand is obviously much higher than we've had in past years. Taken together, that is, clearly risky and tight. But our conclusion was we should now put the budget to bed. This is as good as we're going to get, and the focus needs to shift from setting the budget to actually managing the budget. That should now be the focus.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. So, any other questions? These are really clear slide deck. No, thank you, it's very helpful. Anything to say? Graham, you happy?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Excellent, thank you very much. So we're happy to accept those as our budget setting plan for 16-17. Thank you very much. So, if anybody in the audience would like to ask us any questions, Caroline, I know you've got a really long list. Thank you. Good. Okay, right, and just to prove that Graham and I are on the same page, so I'll just
What you're going to say.
tell you what I was going to say. I was going to say I would like to say a heartfelt thank you to the people who put this report together, to Hardev in his absence for taking us through the year, but particularly to Neil, who's done a fine job in managing year end. It's a really hard thing to do, to pick up on what other people have been doing. Thank you to our lay members who've had a really significant role in the robust governance of CCG, and for their input into the reports, and the associate lay members as well, which is, we recognise is constrained by the requirements of the template, but nevertheless is clear, readable document. So well done. And to Graham, who has overseen delivery for the CCG for the whole year. Thank you very much for your ongoing work and commitment. That is much appreciated. And thank you to the board for a year of solid work. And a huge thank you to our CCG team, because they've delivered these results, led by their exec directors, and you've done a cracking job this year. I know everybody's worked really, really hard. And thank you to people in Wandsworth for their interest and scrutiny and engagement in all the work that we do. So thank you very much. And our next meeting is the 8th of June at the normal time here at East Whitney. Great, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
That was quite close.
For management team colleagues, I suggest we start at 11 rather than 11:15, as we're in good time. So, okay. 11.
Anything? Oh, since that age since I saw you. Yesterday. Yeah. So anything from Adam and Andrew yesterday?
Not really. I only had a very